Welcome to Let's Talk Space Medicine. I'm Kyle Anderson, your medical student slash space nerd host. For your listening entertainment, I gather my other medically inclined space nerd friends to talk all things space medicine. With our powers combined, we hope to explore and entertain the medical questions that stand between us and the stars. Today's orbit, fracture healing. Go break a leg. As a brief disclaimer, anything discussed on Let's Talk Space Medicine should not be considered medical advice, and is therefore not a substitute for seeking medical help from a doctor. We are simply interested in entertaining topics from the field of space medicine. And today, I'm joined by a very special nerd friend, Zach Campbell. A person who reached out to me in the Twitterverse, and really happy to make your acquaintance. And thanks so much for taking the time today to talk to me about some of your work, who you are, what you've done in the past, and where you're going in the future. So thanks for coming on. And let's start it off by just introducing yourself and letting us know who you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate the invite and always willing to talk to other space nerds about space medicine. So my name is Zach Campbell. I am a fourth-year medical student at Marian University in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm born and raised Hoosier, so been in the Midwest most of my life, and hoping to go into emergency medicine in this upcoming cycle.
Nice. So you're a fourth-year student. So you got through third year some way, somehow, and now you're in the promised land of fourth year. Is that right?
Almost. ERAS is due in a week, so still just kind of tweaking that until I get it almost perfect.
Almost perfect. That's good. That's all you can really hope for. So best of luck with that, and feel free to use this show as like this podcast is meant to have a fun, kind of jovial environment to talk about something you're really passionate about, and I can't really think of a better way to demonstrate that. So feel free to be like, hey, I was on this show, and it was amazing, and it was so awesome. And
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I will definitely. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm certainly excited to have you. I think I followed you on Twitter. I think it was a number of months ago, and I was like, okay, this guy's cool. He has a really cool Twitter bio of him, behind the vehicle assembly building with some other people.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to be like a pretty, looks like he has a good time. And then I saw this paper. I have like a, PubMed kind of like shoots me email reminders for papers. And I try to post like one paper a week on Twitter, just to get people maybe reading or get people more involved. And I didn't even realize it was your paper.
Yeah, I know. I saw it and I was like, "Wow, that's awesome! Getting a little publicity here."
Yeah, and so I'm gonna cut over to the paper that we're talking about, and essentially this paper is really. I'm really excited to talk to you about it because. I happen to work in the bone field as well. I'm an MD PhD student, so I both do like medical stuff and then also research stuff. And most of my research is in bone of different sorts. So to get to
Nice.
actually sit down and talk with one of the authors is like it's like the holy grail, right? Especially to have someone who is also interested in the field, and yeah. So this is really such a treat. So kind of like, go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, when did you like first get involved in this project? Because usually they take like a number of years to like work themselves out and get published. So, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so kind of going back, this is a 10-year project that I have only been on for the past 2.5 to 3. So when you're in medical school, that between first and second year, you try to find something to do over the summer, whether that be research or going out and doing some volunteer work or observerships. And I had a mentor at Marion who he was interested in orthopedic surgery, and he presented a small lesson at Marion on his research through Dr. Melissa Casina's lab, and it had the NASA meatball in the right hand corner. I was like, okay, I definitely need to like figure out what he's looking at, what he's doing, what he's talking about. So I reached out to him, and he put me in contact with Dr. Casina, and I went and interviewed for a research internship. And at the beginning, she told me I had expressed my interest in the space aspect from the beginning. I was like, I really want to work on something. If you can just get me a little sliver, a little piece on some paper that's related to NASA, I'd be very happy. Um, as we worked for that first year, doing a couple other projects, murine studies that haven't been released yet. So as a student, doing a lot of the grunt work as far as taking care of the animals, doing the mouse operations, and then doing a lot of literature reviews. January of my second year came around. She was like, she had a meeting with us, and she said, "Hey, NASA moved us up in the queue. We're going up on commercial resupply 18, which goes up this summer. Who wants to go down to Kennedy and join us for about a 4 to 6 week period to get the research ready for the orbital part of the study?" So I jumped on that as fast as I could. I was super excited. It was just a kind of a I think it was fate. The reason why the project was supposed to go up about 4 years ago, but one of the earlier SpaceX commercial resupplies blew up on the pad. The pad blew up, so everything gets pushed back. And I just happened to fall into the right category in the right year that I can go down there. But just as a little kind of introduction to the study in general, this paper is part of a larger research project, rodent research and cell science based. So our lab previously did a component where we did the same bone defect surgeries on mice and used the same bone regenerative pharmacotherapies that we were looking at in my study on actual live mice in space. And that was part of rodent research for, I think it was SpaceX commercial resupply 10. But that went up a little while ago. My project, the one that I was directly involved in hands-on, was Cell Science 2, and that was looking at osteoblasts with different bone adjuvants in orbital housing, and what would happen if we expose the bone and the osteoblast of this. Are we going to get we looked at a lot of microstructural things with bones as far as CT scans go, and looked and see what they did on Earth compared to what they did in orbit. So that's kind of the overarching project, which I loved.
Yeah,
and I'm still working on.
yeah, that it's so cool. I can I can just only imagine seeing the email like, hey, do you want to head down to Kennedy Space Center and perform this animal surgery for them to get up to go to space. Like that's the holy grail. And yeah, this study was I found it like I thought it was really interesting. So like just to kind of back up the truck for our listeners, when you go to space, you kind of you stop using your bones in the traditional way. So you stop like whenever you walk around or whenever you lift things, you kind of have these passive forces on the bone that like they tell your bone, hey, I'm being used, like keep me. I want make density happen and make me structurally sound. So when you go to space, astronauts lose, very significant portions of their bone mineral density, and it's a problem. And even more than that, the mechanism for like how bone loss happens in space is kind of like not really well understood. So you can think of like the classic like teeter totter of like osteoblasts like forming bone, osteoclasts taking bone down. And so in space, is it a lack of bone building or is it a increased resorption, or is it some kind of both? So that's kind of an open question, and so this study kind of looks at in a very interesting way, I thought. And even more than that, the first sentence I thought was really it really struck me, because it reads this: with increased human presence in space, bone loss and fractures will occur. Period. I thought that was just like such a strong sentence, and probably something that was like debated between you all, and like how strong to be on it, because I didn't. It just seems really strong to me. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is as well. I think that it's it's depending on the degree of human involvement in space flight. Right now, engineering engineers out risk factors for fracture risk in space, and then a lot of the activities that astronauts do, their health and safety is paramount in every action and every activity that they conduct. But as we see with just recently Inspiration 4, with more regular people, Haley Arsenault, she had osteosarcoma and a long bone prosthesis when she was going into orbit. If we have more people like that over time, there will be fractures that occur, whether or not it's from mechanical stress, some type of just crazy injury, or one of the things that I discussed with another medical student was thinking about how those rockets are going to land. They land with a lot of force. Over 9 months, say you get to Mars, 9 months comes around, you've lost 9% of your bone mineral density. Maybe the landing's a little bit more jerkier than it should be. You have a fracture. Stuff like that can happen. It's all theoretical, right? But I think it's definitely worth considering, and I think it's going to happen in the future, whether or not it's 10 years from now or 30 years from now. It's good to start thinking preemptively.
Yeah, I think that that way of thinking is kind of like the background music for aerospace medicine. It's always much much better to prevent. It's cheaper, it's safer, I guess it's kind of like all medicine. It should be a lot of more prevention than anything else.
Yeah,
But
100%.
but aerospace medicine in particular is like very risk averse and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting study, and it just came out of the gate like very strong, and I was like, wow, like I had actually an author that you cite, Jean Sabonga. She's like
Hmm.
the essentially like the one of the lead scientists on the musculoskeletal side of NASA. I don't really know how NASA works, and maybe you can help me with that. It just seems like such a rat's nest. Like there's so many different like tunnels, and oh, this is connected to that, and so maybe you can help me with that. But I think she is like a science lead on the MSK Health within the or human research program. But I don't know.
No, you are 100% right. She is. I think I spent hours before writing this paper and a few other ones I was working on reading her material. She takes the lead on a lot of the musculoskeletal projects from the basic science aspect.
Yeah, I actually I chatted her up at the a conference in the before times when we could go to conferences. That was I talked to her because she was essentially doing a fracture risk assessment for a journey to Mars, and
Hmm.
it was like a half an hour talk. And I talked to her afterwards because I was really interested in hearing that the fracture risk is most significant when you come back to Earth. Is what she was saying. I mean, there's still you're still losing so much density that fracture you know is going to be a part of the equation, because you're going to have almost nothing left after a significant period. So I don't know. It seemed interesting to it was a finding that she really didn't expect. She was hoping to like get a home run, just like, oh yeah, you're gonna have this super huge, fracture risk when you go to Mars. But she was like, well, lower gravity,
Hmm.
you're gonna fall softer, but you're gonna have lower density. How does it all work out? And it came up to be not that strong. But obviously, like all of that data is not that model or whatever statistical method she used is only using data that has been generated from systems or studies that don't have enough. There's not enough data. Essentially, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, 100%. Like we're not going to know until we go out and do it. And it's not going to be the first or the second missions there. It's going to be the culmination of multiple missions to Mars and then back successfully until we get like a good data pool. Um, but yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the fracture risk on Mars is going to be a little bit lower than what people expect because there's that reduced gravity. I think that kind of compensates. It will probably compensate for any bone loss that you experience in transit to Mars. Um, but what we don't know, which is kind of one of those mind games we play, is if we lose bone mass going to Mars, and how is the physiology of the body going to respond when you have reduced gravity, and then you get thrown back into microgravity for so many months on the way back, and then you're exposed to full earthbound gravity again. What's going to happen to not only bones, which we're talking about here, but it's going to be kind of stepping into the void as far as medical science goes for everyone.
Yeah, I think one important point that she brought up that alludes to this is that when you know when people come back from a space flight of any kind, you lose a significant amount of density even with exercise, and the amount of follow up, let alone the numbers, are just they lead to a scarcity of knowing what's going to happen way down the line. And
Yeah.
so it's like, oh, are you going to fracture when you get right back, like when you're landing, on a starship or on a Falcon 9? When you're coming back and you have a high G load? Or is it going to be like 20, 30, or 40 years after you get back, which we haven't been able to follow up people for that long? And it could be, it's just kind of a lurking in the future to see like a follow-up study to try and figure that out. So it's kind of it's a hard thing to really deal with, it's, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. So
Not at all. I mean, I talked to a flight surgeon from NASA recently, and she was talking to me about their long-term follow-up of previous astronauts, and they have a flight clinic at Johnson Space Center where they see a lot of the older astronauts, ones that they flew 20 years ago, 15 years ago, with follow-up studies. Some of them are biannually. Some of the human space and humanity have only been playing with each other for what 50, 60 years at this point. There's been a pretty significant lull here the last 10 years with the ending of the space shuttle program. Even though we've had a constant ISS presence in orbit, there's just less people going up. So the number of the end value is decreased. So hopefully we'll get that back up, and then we can kind of see where things go, get a little bit more data generated, so then we can properly respond, develop countermeasures, and then hopefully push the boundary a little bit more.
yeah, I just the Inspiration 4 mission was, I cried. It was
It
like,
was so cool.
yeah, it was
It
so
was so
cool. I
cool.
mean, it was symbolic in so many ways. I mean, so Inspiration 4 is, is billed as the first, essentially like non-professional astronauts. They're all civilian, although astronauts can be civilian, not from the military. So they're non-professional astronauts, quote unquote, people like you and me that went up to space for 3 days and had just got back last night, I think. And
Yep.
yeah, so it really is opening that boundary, and seeing it. It was only a year and a half ago that Demo 2 went up with Bob and Doug for the first launch from American soil in like almost 10 years, and so that was really emotional. But now we've had Crew 2, Crew 3, and I think
Crew 4 is on its way.
Yeah, Crew 4 is on its way. But for some reason, Inspiration 4 was like, oh my god, like it's real, like it may happen to you, it may happen to me. It's just it feels more close to home. So really exciting. But it definitely comes with that medical complication that is a big black box.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
Yeah, so it's like getting back to your study.
Yeah.
It was interesting. So, can you tell me about why your lab chose thrombopoietin? So TPO is what I'll just call it for short. Because when I think of TPO, I don't think of like bone healing. When I think of bone healing, I think of bisphosphonate drugs. So drugs that stop osteoclasts from eating at the bone. They kind of make them sick and unhappy, and they end up dying. And then you have various hormones that stimulate bone growth or decrease bone resorption. And so like intermittent parathyroid hormone. You have sclerostin antibody. You have denosumab, couple different drugs, and I just don't think of TPOs. So can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so Dr. Cassina has been heading this project for a long time. So she's the one who all the cerebral activity goes for this. But her logic and our lab's logic was TPO. It's a naturally derived growth factor that induces megakaryocytes, and which regulates skeletal homeostasis and general fracture healing. Then, so one of the big things with TPO is that it appears that the mechanism of action for fracture healing does not require mechanical stimulation. So, in microgravity, where you're not getting that constant mechanical stimulation that you would here on Earth, it was like, okay, well, maybe we can use TPO as an adjuvant to help induce megakaryocytes, and then helps with regulating skeletal homeostasis. Then I think that's probably the biggest reason. It was just trying to see, okay, can this be used in microgravity or in general to help fracture healing? Because BMP2 is a well-studied adjuvant of bone healing, but there are some related risks as far as increased incidence of cancer later on. And as of late, there's been a couple of papers that have came out that are questioning BMP2's safety profile. It was kind of in response to that.
Yeah. Whenever you introduce, I think I'm getting a little feedback since you took your headphones out.
Yeah, my headphones died. Sorry.
It's okay. I think I can hear you just fine right now. Without any feedback. Yeah, I think it's okay. And now I think your audio is off. Or
Can you hear me?
yes, yeah.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, so we were talking about BMP2 side effects, that kind of thing, and it feels like every bone drug, you can never get like a clear, like this just increases density. This is bisphosphonates, they cause osteonecrosis of the jaw. You get different incidences of cancer with BMP2. One of the things you talk about is bone overgrowth. Yeah, just there's nothing there's nothing clear cut, and so yeah, it's looking for a new, like a novel thing as a bone healing agent would be kind of is is always sought after. might be better. The side effect profile might be better. So yeah, this was a really interesting study. So the basic design was, and correct me if I'm wrong with any of this. I just kind of want to summarize.
Go for it.
You had animals. These are mice on Earth. You had mice, and they were given like just a sham injection, so injection of saline. And then you had a group of mice on Earth as well that received this drug. And I didn't look at the dosing schedule, like how often they were given it, but they were given this drug essentially. And then you had the same thing happening on the ISS. So you had a group of animals that were just exposed to space flight, and then you had a group that was had a space flight and the drug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
you got it.
Yeah, so it's just kind of it allows you to compare both the effects of spaceflight alone, which is like really important, and then the effects of just this new agent, and then also the combinatorial effects as well. So yeah, and then pretty much most of the data that you looked at was micro CT. And so this is just like X-ray. So you wanted to look at the structure of things, and it's kind of not more complicated than that. It's like, was there more of it there, less of it there? How was it formed? This microarchitecture is a fun, fancy word, but it's like, how is it built? Is what you're kind of looking at.
Yeah, and it's not just looking at the microarchitecture in one bone. You're looking at it in different bones in the body. I mean, when we go back to these samples, we're harvesting everything from the calvarium, mandible, ribs, sternum, and then like the weight-bearing bones, which is the humerus, the femur, and even the vertebrae we're looking at. So it's a pretty comprehensive look at mouse like the mouse architecture. And then we go through and we look at so many different variables within each to kind of see what's going on at that small architectural level in spaceflight. So the data itself, Ariana, who's a orthopedic surgeon down in Brazil who worked with the lab, she did a lot of the data analysis, and then other members of the lab did the micro CT scan. So it's a pretty extensive effort on part of the lab to get all this data in, just so we can start crunching numbers and see kind of trends and everything.
Yeah. So I don't know how this lab worked, but I do quite a bit of micro CT like work, and it involves like very carefully positioning your sample in like a tube where the X-ray detector can kind of go around and scan it. And so you set up this this scan. That usually takes on the order of fractions of an hour to many hours, depending on the resolution that you want. But then after all of that, you have to contour these. You have to tell the computer where you think the bone is and where you think there's space. And god dang, that takes so long. So the fact that you guys did all these different bones. And all this different analysis is awesome. Is just great to see. You'd love to see it.
It's a great lab. I mean, I could not ask for a better lab to have joined a medical school. Not just from the space geek standpoint, but using really it's a lot of technical work. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna look at the pretty pictures in your in the paper for a second. So these are the different groups I described earlier. And what this is the L4 vertebrae. So this is like the vertebral body. So your spine is essentially a piece of bone, then a jelly donut, a piece of bone, jelly donut. So we're looking at the bone in the lower back, and essentially we're looking at the spongy bone, or the trabecular bone, the bone that looks like a sponge. And this type of bone, its ability to cross-link and bridge can allow structural resiliency, like from forces kind of going in many directions. And L4 vertebrae was probably chosen because it's probably like the most one of the most common sites for vertebral fracture. So when people get osteoporosis, if they're not breaking their hip, they're kind of having a decompression of their spine, and usually at this site. So this was a well chosen site. And so what this is just like that trabecular bone in that vertebrae, kind of reconstructed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so and then you did some. So tell me about the defect surgery.
Yeah, so that was one of the more fun hands-on aspects of the lab for the students. So what we would do is on Earth, before everything got sent up, we had and I was not part of the group that sent this project up, unfortunately. I was on the back end doing the research, but during my time in the lab, I was doing the same procedure just for other studies on Earth. So it's the same exact thing, just for different projects that the lab was working on. But the surgery included making a small incision over the
I think your audio cut out again.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, it's just me. I need to get closer. So we made a small incision over the muscle belly of the mid shaft of the femur, and then we separated the muscle belly out. Took a Dremel tool that dentists use, small blade, 1 millimeter, and we made a small 2 millimeter defect in the femur. Then what we did is we would insert a collagen sponge with an implant that was 2 millimeters in diameter, and wrap the collagen sponge around that and put an IM pin through the femur itself, and then sew everything back up. So there's been extensive studies done in the lab prior to my arrival, showing the efficacy of the surgery. I mean, usually the mice are effectively weight bearing within a couple of days after the surgery. I mean, obviously, it's not a precise science as far as making
mouse recovery. Yeah.
Exactly. It's more or less just we want to see the fracture site itself and see if we have evidence of good union between the two segments. So, I mean, that was all student run for the most part. Down at NASA, I know they had a couple of orthopedic surgeons that were also working on the project as well, alongside a couple of the student surgeons. So they were getting through a lot.
And so those orthopedic surgeons, were they associated with NASA, or like were they housed within NASA? Were they at where were they from?
So I think one of them was a MD PhD, and I cannot remember where he was from, but there was a couple of others that were from the U.S. Army. So this was in conjunction with the DoD and NASA. So there was, when I was down there for the Cell Science 2 mission, we were working with people from the Department of Defense and from the U.S. Army. So it was a multitude of organizations coming together for this.
Yeah, I mean, I've chatted up my academic mentors about almost everyone in science, in medical science, applies for NIH grants, so National Institutes of Health grants, and then especially in the musculoskeletal field, people also apply for DoD grants, so Department of Defense grants, and they talk about all the red tape with that. And then my mentor actually said that working with NASA is about 10 times more red tape than the DoD. And so I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I like working with all three of those seems like a recipe for disaster. So
to be honest, when we were preparing to go down to Kennedy, the students and the PhDs in the lab had to undergo some training on the bioreactors and how to operate everything before we even got down there. So we had to get some proficiency in doing all the activities before we got down there. And my PI, Dr. Casina, she was on the phone quite a bit with NASA, the DoD. There is a lot of collaboration that needs to occur for something like this to go off. And I think to that point, which I thought was pretty interesting, when I was actually down there, it's a basic science lab. So we have, the hoods and everything in the lab on one side. and then there was a separating wall, and then there was the engineering side for the bioreactor cassettes that would be sent to orbit. And so that's a whole different contracted team that's not part of NASA either. They're just contracted through NASA. They're it's Space Tango, based out of I think Southern Indiana or Kentucky. So we were working with them, and then between working with them and getting our project into their cassettes, then it goes to NASA spaceflight operations before launch, and then they hand it off to the SpaceX group that then preps it for the Dragon capsule implementation. There's so many different things that have to go right, and we were one of like the 21 projects going up at the time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean it's a lot of it's a lot. Everything has to go right, and people have to communicate really well for something like this to happen.
Yeah, I can only imagine dealing with like temperature sensitive stuff, live animals, like stuff that, just imagine not being able to, to fix something if you like is going wrong, or, to be able to preserve something perfectly for essentially an indefinite period of time, because you have to what happens at the launch invariably gets delayed, it's like, and what if the rats don't have food or water, and then that affects your study, and then like all this stuff has to be like baked into the mission design probably. And yes. it seems like, oh my God, like what a how hard, it's got to be so hard.
It was one of those things when we were down there, we were prepared for 4 different experiments. So we did the same experiment 4 times, just staggering it. We started one the first day we were there, then staggered it 4 days, and then 4 other days, because, inevitably with spaceflight, there's going to probably be a delay somewhere around, somewhere around either the launch vehicle or weather delays, Kennedy being a little hit or miss with a lot of the lightning and storms. So yeah, we started four different rounds of the project, and they did as well 4 different rounds of mouse surgeries for Rodent Research 4.
Oh, that's okay. That doesn't cost that much. It doesn't cost tens of thousands of dollars probably. Like running a large animal experiment costs a lot of money, right? And so to run 4 of them is like, you gotta have deep pockets for that. That's crazy.
And the military has some pretty deep pockets. So, the DoD and Army, they're very, very kind and very willing to spend money on research projects that may or may not benefit them in the long run. And that's one of the other things I wanted to touch about on our project, and kind of going back to the first statement about fractures in orbit, right? Fractures in microgravity, fractures in space missions. A lot of what NASA does, and a lot of what our project kind of represents, is taking research that is done in low Earth orbit and hopefully translating it down to people here on Earth.
Wait, really? I thought space medicine was only for astronauts and, the select people that go up to space. You're telling me that it's about humans on Earth? That's crazy. I've never...
I know.
I know, but dude, like, how many times have you run into someone who's like, oh, why would you want to do that?
Oh, there's people I've talked to, when you talk to them about space medicine in general, they're like, oh, that could be better used for medicine here on Earth. And I'm like, oh,
it's literally the same thing.
Guys, it's amazing when you talk to people, some of the stuff that they don't realize comes from our journey into orbit. One of my friends got pretty defensive about this at one point, and she had just recently gotten LASIK surgery. So I told her, I was like, hey, the technology for the laser technology for that derives from docking between spacecraft. And that kind of blew her mind that even she had no idea. So that was pretty interesting conversation. But yes, yeah. I get that a lot.
Yeah.
But as far as our project goes, is translating down, people see osteoporosis is so common here on Earth. I mean, it is very, very common, and it causes a lot of morbidity and even inevitably mortality in some patients. And so we're looking at ways to develop countermeasures, not only to bone loss in space, but translating it down here to people like that, And then the reason the Army and DoD was so interested in it is that since the war in Iraq and war in Afghanistan started in the early 2000s, a lot of injuries from soldiers are extremity injuries based off of bombs. The armor protects the main organs, the vital organs here in the chest. Helmets protect the head, but the extremities are often left unattended just because of functionality for combat. So with that, you get a lot of blast injuries that result in, pretty extensive fractures and bone pathology. So that was another aspect that we were hoping to translate down here to Earth, was not only for osteoporotic individuals, but also for people that are soldiers and people that are, injured in combat.
Yeah, on one hand, it's like, it's really good that it's vitally important that you protect those organs and your patient survives, but like the downstream effects is now you have to deal with all of these extra things, and it just opens so much more work to do. And so I think this work is really, fracture healing and osteoporosis are two things that just millions of people around the world have. So osteoporosis alone is like, it's like one in 3 women are gonna have.
Yep.
And it's like one in 10 men. It's like, this is like a significant fraction of the world's population is gonna have this. And so, figuring out how to do it and using the unique environment of space is just like, it's going to uncover ways for uncover new mechanisms for how bone works. It's like we've only studied bone with one gravity, and it's like it's evolved in this, and so when you're able to use that as like an independent variable, as like add gravity or subtract gravity, it's a really interesting way to look at it, because bone behaves differently, right? Because I think from your study, I can't actually open up these tables for some reason right now, but it seemed like the effects of TPO was only really there in spaceflight, right? Was that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, talk about that. That's like super interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the, we kind of alluded to that earlier on, where we really don't know what's going on in space as far as the physiology goes, on how bone homeostasis is maintained. So it's pretty interesting to see in a couple of the bones. I'm trying to look through and remember which ones exactly, so I don't mislead anybody. I know in the mandible we saw some changes, and then in the L4 vertebra we saw a little bit of change. But the weight-bearing bones, it was a hit or miss. And one of the things that we were kind of wondering, based on previous studies, mice are not like humans in the fact that their weight-bearing bones are typically their femurs, but mice are pretty confused when you send them into low Earth orbit and gravity's gone. And earlier projects by our class, or our lab, in conjunction with NASA, were around developing the orbital housing for the mice. And so we found that they were more likely to use their forehands than they were to use their legs in low Earth orbit. So earlier studies showed changes in microstructures in the humerus more than they did the femur. So as far as our study was concerned, this is kind of I hate to say I love my paper to death, but it's more of a residual study, because we wanted to make sure that all the samples were being used to their maximum efficiency, so we could really kind of parse out what was going on. But we noticed that there was a lot of change at distal sites, more so than there were at the sites where TPO was directly injected and directly exposed to bone. So this includes the mandible and the calvarium and places that weren't the femoral defect in the femur. And so what we were trying to figure out is TPO being effective at circulating throughout the bloodstream more in microgravity, and then allowing it to help with maintaining some of the microstructures in orbit, or whatever else it could be. So it's just kind of slowly putting together the piece of the puzzle. And this is the first paper out of a couple more that we're hoping to get out that will further parse along what's going on.
Yeah, I'm certainly look forward to reading it. Yeah, I mean, using every part of the animal like efficiently is like it's always important, but after all that work to run this study, it's even more so. So, it's really nice to see that every part of the animal was used, pretty much every bone. It seems like you just took every bone out. So,
yeah, different points. I mean, as far as research projects go, this lab was very hands-on for students. Not just the surgical aspect, but we were also doing the extractions of the bones and everything for all the mice, and even maintaining post-op conditions for them. Not just in after they got back from, or they didn't come back from orbit. They were sacrificed there and then sent back. But a lot of our current studies and everything are, they require quite a bit of follow-up as far as after even the surgeries go forward. And our labs even changed up how we're doing the segmental bone defects based on new research and everything. So we're trying out different methods.
Yeah, can't wait to read that. Read all those studies, and it seems like part of it is going to show up on the NASA Gene Lab. Do you know about NASA Gene Lab as like this open source database for all biological experiments that have been run? They have like a data sets that anyone can use, and so is this data or is genomic or other sorts of sequencing data is that going to show up there from this particular study?
I'm not 100% certain, to be honest. That's something that my PI would know more than I would. As of late, my involvement in the lab has decreased because I'm going through applications. I've been doing audition rotations, so I've been involved with like a lot of follow up and everything, and writing manuscripts. But as far as what the lab's doing now and her contact with NASA, I would have to ask her to get back to you on that, and I definitely will, because I actually want to know whether or not it's going to be in there or not too.
Yeah. There's only a couple bone studies right now, and so I'm like looking for a couple more just to kind of like see if I can throw together something that looks interesting. So,
oh, absolutely. I mean, and that was one of the reasons I got excited about the project was, bone loss in space. Bone loss in general. Bones are what keep our structure up and running. You kind of talked about this earlier, but especially with those combat veterans, you can protect all the vital organs and everything and keep them alive, but losing a limb or having a irreversible injury to an extremity is life changing for people. So I think the impact on the musculoskeletal system here on Earth and in orbit can't be understated at all. Can't be overlooked. So it's important that we try to figure out what's going on, and then hopefully the residual effect will be better medical therapies for people here on Earth.
Yeah. So do you think will TPO ever be used? Like, where do you see it going forward? You found like TPO affecting bone microstructure is, I don't know how novel that is, but it feels interesting. Like, it feels new to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you feel like this is something that, where do you feel like this is going to go?
So as far as my personal opinion, I think it's important to look into it further to figure out what the mechanism of action is, so then we can further detail out how it's used. I think it can be used. It's just figuring out in what scenario and in what case will it be best utilized. And it is pretty novel. My Dr. Casina has a patent for it, so it's a pretty novel therapy.
Yeah,
Um,
that's great. Yeah, I just never would have expected, like, in the discussion in your paper that I've been kind of like casually scrolling through. It
mhm,
talks about like the traditional role of TPO, and you talked about
mhm,
megakaryocytes, I think earlier on, and
mhm.
platelet formation and all that kind of stuff. So it is interesting that um, it feels like it not only helped fracture healing, but it increased distal, away from the site of where TPO is administered, which is like, what is happening? you know
Yeah, and I mean, and that's why I think further studies are going to have to be done to kind of prod that path along. Eventually, we could possibly do with it. So yeah, no, I mean, like I say, it's a great project to be a part of. Um, yeah, and one of the I talked a little bit about how rodent research and the mission I was on, Cell Science 2, they were in conjunction with each other. Cell Science 2 is looking directly at osteoblastic um, and the effects of microgravity on osteoblastic activity. Um, we haven't gotten all the data back for that yet. So that's certainly another piece of the puzzle, mainly because it's going through so many organizations, and COVID has thrown a major wrench in the works as far as communication and mission priorities and everything else have gone. So I'm excited here in the next couple of years to start getting that stuff back. But um, it just takes a long time. I mean, space takes a long time, not only during to get to the point where it's going to go up into orbit, um, and then where things from orbit come down, they can be properly analyzed and then interpreted.
yeah, I think I've known some people that have worked on other like space flight research, and I think that is a constant. You're always dealing with delay. You're always dealing with you know um, red tape or communication issues, and it's not for the faint of heart. So
I give the two the couple PhDs in my lab that we're working on it and my PI a lot of credit because it is a very involved research project that requires a lot of persistence. So I'm just glad I got to play a small part in that. Um, because most of my lab workers, the colleagues I have that are medical students that rotate through, they're interested in the orthopedic side. A lot of them want to do orthopedic surgery. So um, I had toyed with the idea of doing orthopedic surgery there for a little bit because I did enjoy the mouth surgeries, but I definitely enjoyed the space research aspect more so. So, you know, I mean, my ultimate goal is to be a flight surgeon. So this is just kind of one piece of, my involvement and hoping to get there.
yeah, so let's transition kind of more to you. Like um, you talking about the choice of emergency medicine, your application coming up, and then becoming a flight surgeon down the line. Can you kind of talk about that process for you, and where you hope to be and what you hope to do in the next like week, month, year, whatever you care to share.
Yeah. So, I just a little bit about me growing up. I was always a big space geek. My favorite author is Isaac Asimov. I've read his books probably two or three times a piece since middle school and high school. I went to Huntsville, Alabama, twice for space camp. So that kind of kid growing up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, loved it. It was a great time. Um, but I was more focused on becoming a doctor. I played some college football, so those things took up a lot of time. I kind of, that the space stuff went in the background, and just so happened, like I told you earlier, I saw this lab And afterwards, I was hooked. I was like, I need to figure out how I can get into this field, what I could do in this field, and started reaching out on my own to people that were willing to talk to me, really anybody. So uh, just so happened that my one of the guys who graduated in the class above me from Marion, he did the NASA clerkship the year before me, so he pointed me in the direction of that. And I'd already been looking at it, but he gave me a little bit more solid advice on how to approach it. So I'll be doing that here in a couple weeks
And
in October.
what's that solid advice? Like, share with the class.
Yeah, his advice was like make it more personal, not something that you just want to add to your resume and you think is cool, but I mean people that really want to do this field. When you go in to apply and write, to the committee like why they should select you for this opportunity. Um, so it was more pointers on the which I had already had a lot of it down, and I had some involvement with NASA through the research already. So I'm certain that that probably helped a bit. But for anybody that listens to this that wants to pursue that, I mean, absolutely, reach out to the people that are listed on the site, um, and just talk to them. Say, hey, I'm interested in this. Would love to chat with you. I plan on applying, here and there. So, would love to chat. Basically, just reach out and try to build a connection. Um, and I mean, I think it's more important to do this clerkship if you're actually hoping to go into the field, and it's not just something like, oh, this will be something that's cool on my resume I can talk about in interviews and stuff like that. Like, I think they're pretty good about telling who's actually interested and who isn't.
And so, you are going to do this clerkship, or did you just complete it, or when are you planning on doing it?
October. So I'll be doing it in October. And then after that, I'm hoping to. Well, while I'm down there, I'm going to do the Wings Over Houston air show. So I'll be helping doing medical team stuff with that. Those are the two big things coming up, and then it'll be interviews, and then hopefully somebody in emergency medicine likes me enough to ask me to have a job with them next year.
Mm-hmm. Get down on one knee and propose to you.
Yeah, please take me. I'll do whatever you want. Give me a spot. But through the process, it's put me in contact with a lot of really cool people that have given me, similar advice. If you want to get in this field, join AMSRO, the Aerospace Medicine Student Resident Organization. Join ASMA. Couldn't make it to the meeting this year. I was really, really hoping to.
I was in Denver, Colorado, and it was like kind of the first meeting. I didn't go either, but it feels like it was like the first meeting of that whole society that was after COVID. So it seemed like a big kind of thing to go to.
Yeah, and everybody I've talked to in the aerospace sector, they're like, go to the meeting. You're gonna meet people. It's such a I've started to realize and medicine's a small community in general, but then when you get into specialty, it's really small. And then you get to something like aerospace, everybody knows everybody. So people are willing to help you out if you're passionate about it. I mean, it's some of the conversations I've had with flight surgeons and people on like boards for different space companies. If you show interest in and a passion that they are also passionate about, they're willing to help you, and they would they want you to succeed. So I think that's probably the biggest advice. Join those organizations, go there, try to get in the clerkships if you can. I know UTMB also has a short course that's really good. I'm hoping to do that my first year of residency or my second year of residency. One of those two I'm going to try to carve out some time for. And then I know that AMSRO just announced a new kind of a new mission to help connect medical students and students in general around the world with aerospace research. I know that was headed up by the executive committee, and I think they're trying to put that into action right now. So stuff like that, just reach out and get involved. That's what I've done, and just show that you're truly passionate about it. Kyle, I've also noticed that you have is that the ISS
Yeah,
behind it?
yeah, yep.
So is that the Lego one?
Yes, yep. Do you please,
Yeah.
please? Yes, let's go.
Yeah.
Yes, I
I was like,
love
all
it.
right. I was like, all right, my guy, I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I think my dad got it for me over COVID. He just sent me like an Amazon package of it and put it together, and you know, it's like your mice were up there. That's insane to think about, right?
So I was definitely not. I love all my lab mates to death, but I was definitely more interested in the project on Kennedy than they were. I mean, we had other projects going on they were working on too, and they had presentations to do for their school. So I volunteered to do whatever I could to stay in the lab, we worked in the space station processing facility, which was super cool. We got a tour of the high bay, where they prepared some of the capsule segments and everything. But one of my jobs as a medical student was I was in charge of transferring our bioreactors from the lab over to engineering for final integration into the orbital housing. So I think I was one of the two last people to touch our cells and our research before it got up into orbit. And yeah, that was kind of a cool thought. Like, dang, there's something that I was holding, 2 days ago that's now in the hands of I think it was Expedition 60 that was up there conducting
Hmm.
the research. So yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I've managed to talk to a flight surgeon here or there, and I'm kind of reaching out, trying to put together, a network of people that I even know that does space medicine, because it's very dispersed in my like understanding of the landscape. So I ended up talking to a couple people, and you know, and they almost always say, like, you have to want to do this job. Like, don't ever think about doing this to become an astronaut. I'm like, that's not like the point. Like, if that ends up happening, who the heck knows, right?
Yeah.
Who the heck knows? I won't ever take it off the table, but like the point is, I think the medical issues are so interesting. And I get, it's so nice to hear someone else that's just completely jazzed to be like, I touched this last thing that like went to the space station. It's like,
Cool.
it's so cool. And I mean, it must have been interesting to be around other people in your lab that were like, maybe not as interested, or you were like, bursting with joy, and you're like, oh my god, this is the coolest thing. And they're like, that's they may not be able to follow you there. So what was that like?
It was so. I think one of the funnier moments on the trip, we got a tour by one of the Air Force members that was the quality control manager for our project from the military side. He's been working down on these projects for the better part of 30 years, so he's very well versed in Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. So one of the crazy things that I experienced down there was, once you get the NASA JSC badge and you get security clearance, you can go almost anywhere on the Air Force Base, freely in your car. Besides like certain buildings, and I know they have like a Trident nuclear submarine, uh, place over there as well, so you can't go in those areas. But we were taking a tour of the Air Force Base, and he was like pointing out space pads and all this stuff, and he started saying something about the ULA launch facility out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said something about, oh, I know, the Delta Heavy and Delta 4 rockets launch from there. And then my PI, who I've been working with for the better part of a year, she looked at me and she goes, "You're really interested in this stuff, aren't you?" I was like, "Yes." I was like, "I know all this stuff. Like, you don't
Yeah.
understand." Um, so we did a tour. Like, I got to see. We got to go up to the VAB, which that is a awesome building. I mean, just it's crazy how big it is. I mean, in pictures don't do it justice. Um, the other cool part of our trip, which this is me going off on a tangent about being a geek, but It was our launch happened 2 days after the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. So there was a lot of fanfare down there about Apollo 11. Uh, Launch Complex 39. They had the Apollo 50 flag hanging on it when we were down there. So that was really cool. And, at the time, Mike Pence was the vice president. And he is head of the space program in the United States in his role. And him being from Indiana and us being from Indiana, we actually got to meet him out in the tarmac when he landed on the space shuttle tarmac with Air Force Two. So, and with him, which was really cool, was Buzz Aldrin. So, I got a fist bump Buzz Aldrin.
Hey, it's certainly better than a punch, right?
Yeah, that's why I was with the reporter and him sock him in the face.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have a picture of me fist pumping Buzz Aldrin.
Oh my god, that's so cool.
It was so cool. I was like, oh, this is like the second dude to walk on the friggin' moon, and here he is in front of me. So, from a space geek standpoint, the trip was, it was just day after day. Even if we were just in the lab and the space station processing facility, it was like, this is super freaking cool. Getting to be down here where so many historical space launches and activities have taken place. So yeah, I was geeking out the entire time. I think so. My friends thought I was really freaking weird, but I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is where Alan Shepard launched up first. We went to the pad, mm-hmm. and they have the parking spots labeled for all 7 of the Mercury astronauts still. So I was like geeking out, taking pictures of parking spaces, and my lab mates were like, what the hell are you doing?
I relate to you so much, man. It's just like, oh my god, here is where this happened, and like it's hallowed ground,
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah. So the entire experience was unique, to say the least, but it definitely set me on a path where I hope one day I can, continue with the space agency and help me. Honestly, I would love to help common people like, you and I go up to orbit someday. I think that's not as far off as people think it is, to be honest. I get the feeling talking to certain people in the field that it's going to become a reality pretty fast.
Yeah, I think what was it today that I saw a headline, and this headline was just like SpaceX has been approached by just so many more people since Inspiration went up. Mm-hmm. That they're essentially like there's a lot to come, like literally on the books already, kind of thing. And so SpaceX is now going to be like this kind of astronaut camp. It seems like, which I think when they first got kind of their start, I started following them in like 2014. Really, it's like that was when I like figured out that space medicine even existed. Because I didn't need, like, who knows, like who like how do you begin to even know that this job exists? Like it's not straightforward. To me, it wasn't. No. And so I figured out it existed, and then I'm like, oh my god, they're trying to land rockets. They're gonna like need a doctor someday to take care of their astronauts, maybe. And now we're like, it's enough time has happened that it's kind of a thing now.
It's I talked to somebody who works for SpaceX, and this isn't an official statement by any means. This is just kind of a hearsay conversation. But I think they have the feeling that they're going to need a lot of physicians here in the near future, and I think they're trying to ramp up that with reaching out. There's a new medical student clerkship that you can do with SpaceX that I know was first offered only to military students, and now it's kind of expanded to whoever wants to join. And so that's this exciting opportunity. I applied for that. I didn't get that, but
what? Yeah. What's up with that?
Dang it. I'm sure there were so many qualified people that applied for that. And I think they only took 8. I believe, this time around. But it sounds like they're planning to expand that number, which just kind of shows they're going to end up having to ramp up their human, their human space program from a medical standpoint here coming up quick. So I wouldn't be surprised if they start hiring more physicians, and I know some PAs and NPs and nurses that are getting involved as well. So it's a pretty broad it's a pretty broad undertaking, and so it needs a little bit of everything from the medical realm. Because I know traditionally emergency medicine, internal medicine, and family practice have been the main physicians driving space programs. Just, I think, based on the primary care aspect of aerospace medicine, the preventative health aspect of aerospace medicine. I could see, they need everybody they can in any capacity, for this.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it's a really interesting point because I think if we're gonna play, if we're gonna play by today's rules in the future, that's not going to be the right way to look at it because it has been limited to those specialties. And so I think if you were to choose a particular specialty for aerospace medicine, it's kind of that's the backwards way of thinking, I think, where it's like you choose what you're most passionate about and you'll find a way to marry it with space medicine. It's the way that I look at it. Yeah.
100% agree. And that's why I've been told by, the flight surgeons that I've talked to. You can't choose a specialty based, for aerospace medicine. They want people that are passionate about whatever they choose to do. The guy from my school, the year ahead of me, he's going into diagnostic radiology. And so, cosmic radiation is a huge problem. And the best people suited for that are going into radiology and, interventional radiology, stuff like that. The changes in the ocular, and I can't think of the word, changes in orbit, ophthalmology, that's a huge issue. Heck, I was even talking, I was talking to somebody that said that the dermatology is a big issue up there because gravity and wind help remove particles and whatever else gets on our skin without us really knowing it, but up there it just sits unless you forcibly wipe it off, and they have to go through and clean the vents every week. And so rashes and preventing rashes, preventing bacterial infections, you could see where infectious disease would get involved, dermatology would get involved. Aerospace really requires everything to function. And as we were talking about earlier, stepping off into the void, we're going to need to know how the human body changes on every aspect and not the stuff that we're just focused on right now. We have no idea what the problems are going to be here in the next 20 years.
Yeah, it's again like a good summary, and in short, it's just like every possible thing that can go wrong with the body is going to be either it's going to be changed in microgravity. So it's like you could think of any body part or any organ system or any way of thinking about health. It's going to change in space, and it's going to be largely unknown, and until we go out more and we have more people, and so I think it's really, we're at the beginning of the field really opening up to those to all sorts of people, and it's really exciting to be a part of the push, right? So it's like if you try and I try and reflect on why am I so crazy about this? Why do I think that it's so cool that you took photos of a parking lot? Why do I think that's so cool, but why do I think it's cool? It's because those people were putting their grain of sand on human expansion to space and living amongst the stars and doing the Elon Musk of things, where it's like an exciting future. And gosh darn it, we need an exciting future because it's better, it's more fun and exciting, and we got to do that with our lives, right? And we want to how cool would it be to be in those science fiction, to have our humanity inch towards that, and instead of just staying home. And I know that there's all these arguments about we should spend that on money for hunger and poverty and all of that, and very, very important work. And it's like, but we should spend like maybe 1% of our money on like an escape plan, if, or like a way for us to go out and explore. Doesn't have to be the majority by any means. It's like 1%, not so bad.
Exactly.
And it's like tripling the budget of NASA is if but it brought it up to 1%.
Yeah.
And it's like,
exactly.
So I don't know. There's plenty of debate there, and always bringing it into it's for kind of back to your study. It's like you studied something off of Earth for Earth. You learned something new about how this drug works. How fracture healing works, and that's just is a really just it's so interesting. Is a really interesting study, and I can't wait to hear more about like those studies coming up, and to maybe reschedule another interview when you're down in when you're down at Johnson.
I haven't even gotten to sign my project yet. Hopefully that's going to be happening this week. So I definitely love to follow up with stuff. Like I said, I'm passionate about this field, and I want anybody who wants to get into it. I want to help them get into it, because I've had a lot of people. I think it's been half fate, half. I think it's half fate, half luck, getting into some of this stuff. So, I know for the majority of the country, it's very hard to get involved in things like this. I mean, I was so fortunate that a lab in Indianapolis, Indiana, was working with NASA. A lot of times it's places that are located more in Texas or Hawthorne, or places that the aerospace field is a little bit heavier built in. But yeah, I really appreciated the time talking to you, and any other way I can help people and explain stuff, I'd love to do it.
So yeah, I'm just gonna cut over to your Twitter profile. So yeah, this is where you can likely get in touch with Zach, and give him a nice follow, increase spread the word. Yeah, it's been really nice talking to you. I feel like I want to assemble all of the interested medical students and people that are actually doing space medicine, because it feels so hard to actually get to do it. And so this is why I made the podcast, was to bring people like yourself to show your space nerddom. That's what it's about, and having fun and showing that incredible paper you did. Like that's like it was with the whole team, and I'm sure you learned a lot, some unexpected moments, and research can often feel like laborious, and like contouring these CT scans can feel like, what the heck am I doing? But I just want to say again, like that was a really interesting paper, and it's been really nice to talk to you. And I think we're kind of approaching orbit. I call these orbits because the International Space Station takes about an hour and a half to go around the Earth, and so we have been talking for about an hour and an hour and 15 or an hour and 20. And so yeah, just any kind of final thoughts, and we'll wrap the show up.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the time taken to come on your show. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for kind of allowing me to talk about the experiences I've had. I've really enjoyed it so far. So hopefully in the future I can do some more cool stuff, and I'm really looking forward to the upcoming month.
Yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to messaging you more, and say like hey, like how does that even work, like in terms of like the project you get assigned. So what does that even mean? What do you even hope to accomplish in that period of time, and all that stuff.
Definitely in contact.
Yeah, and so hopefully we'll have you back on the show. I usually have two other co-hosts that weren't able to make it today. They're both medical students as well, one in their third year and then one in their fourth year. One of them is actually down in at Baylor College of Medicine doing human genomics. So he's really interested in personalized medicine. And then my other friend is a third year who's interested in nutrition and public health, besides their whole medicine stuff. So.
And those are both like super prevalent fields in preventative health and aerospace medicine. So it'd be really cool to talk to them at some point.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening to Let's Talk Space Medicine. If you want to continue the discussion and meet more fellow space nerds, be sure to check out @TalkSpaceMed on Twitter and the Let's Talk Space Medicine server in Discord. Thanks, and see you next orbit.